I'm John, and welcome back to Pass Forward. If you've been following the Arab Spring revolts, and you've seen the regimes fall in Egypt and Libya after a brutal civil war, you've also probably been watching what's going on in Syria. Following their brethren in Libya, Egypt, and elsewhere, the Syrian people rose up and attempted to overthrow their dictator Assad. Assad responded with a brutal crackdown that shocked many in the Arab world and left people asking, why isn't the West doing something? Well, the answer is a complicated one. It factors not only relative military capabilities of Libya and Syria, but also politics, both regional and world politics, that have placed hindrances in Syria that didn't happen in Libya. It's a lot more complicated than, as many people are saying, Libya has oil, Syria doesn't have oil, and that's why the West is reacting the way it is in Syria and not doing what they did in Libya. Sort of something like this, if you can imagine. It's like, 'cause they don't have any oil, man, and like Libya had oil, and they're all like, yeah, let's go help it, man. You know, Bush and Cheney, well, they're not there anymore, and then Obama, I'm so like bummed out. What a letdown, man. No blood for oil. Occupy my couch. I hear you, man, but there's a lot more than that going on. Let's start with the relative military capabilities of Syria and Libya. Libya had a relatively small army. It was kept divided and in a weakened state because Muammar Gaddafi was worried it would eventually overthrow him. In Syria, Assad controls the loyalty of much of the army, although some of it has fractured into a free Syrian army, which is finally providing some effective resistance against the regime. Where this will lead, we don't know. Syria, if you recall, back in 1983, actually managed to shoot down 2 U.S. planes during an air raid over the Bekaa Valley. Now, the technology in terms of how much the Western Air Forces have progressed has been quantum leaps since then. And in Syria, they may have grown a little bit, but much of their army is still in a 1980s, 1990s state. I think an entire air campaign against Syria might lose maybe half a dozen planes, if that. However, it would be a much more difficult option, and the opposition is not centered in a specific area where they can advance from. Secondly is the diplomatic front, and this is far more important than the military. In the case of Libya, the Arab League was united, and the world was relatively united in that they wanted action taken, and we were able to get a mandate for a no-fly zone done at the United Nations. Now, you may argue that NATO went farther than it was mandated too, and I do accept that. However, there was that diplomatic cover, both regional in the Middle East with the Arab League and globally with the UN, crucially Russia and China, that was enabled NATO to get that job done. Plus, they could base from Italy close enough to launch attacks, but far enough to be away from retaliation. In the case of Syria, it's far more complicated. The Arab League has recently expelled Syria or suspended their membership. However, they're dead set against any Western involvement, especially NATO involvement, in Syria. Secondly, no United Nations resolution would ever go through because Russia and China have been very clear that they will veto it. They likely won't even support sanctions unless the Arab League comes across. Turkey as well neighbors Syria, and Turkey is a member of NATO, and they do not want military intervention either. So, in Libya we had diplomatic cover, and it was militarily more feasible. Much more complicated and no diplomatic cover in Syria. Second point is, an additional point, under what circumstances might the West intervene? There's a couple of things you could think of. A CNN moment. There aren't a lot of Western reporters in Syria right now, but if something particularly atrocious was caught on tape and played over and over again, or several events over the course of the week, it might move the world, and might even move Russia, China, and the Arab League to authorize intervention. Secondly, if it spills over into Turkey, and there is clashes for whatever reason because of cross-border incursions from the FSA between the Syrian army and the Turkish army, Turkey might invoke NATO's Article 5, meaning an attack on one is an attack on all. The United States invoked Article 5 after the September 11th attacks. To my knowledge, it was the only time it was done. If Turkey decides to go that route, it would be the second time it would be done and would obligate NATO to intervene. So those are the only two scenarios I see of any intervention by NATO in Syria, and frankly, the Western Armed Forces need a break, and they need to save it up for any potential crisis with Iran. More on that later. So think about it, my friend. It's a lot more complicated than one has oil and one doesn't have oil. There's a lot in play, and I think it's highly unlikely the West will intervene in any meaningful way in Syria unless one of those two objectives are met. A CNN horror moment or something going on with Turkey. So thank you very much for watching Pass Forward. I'd like to hear your comments, thumbs up, favorite my videos. And just because I'm the gentleman that I am, back to you. I'll leave you with the last word, my hippie friend. Have a good night. So man, it's all about the oil, man, and corporate media and reason, and it makes sense. It's for losers, man. No blood for oil. All the fuzz. Occupy my floor.